All right, we're ready to take on our third tool now. This one is a little different because this is something that deals with the invisible. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I bet this has happened to most of us, if not all of us. There are certain days we find ourselves either wrapped up in disappointment, it seems to just go on, and anger, fear, anxiety that just doesn't seem to have a focus, but continues. That's usually the warning sign of the invisible problem, of the hidden assumption. And so I want to suggest that to succeed long-term in serving professions, you need to be aware of how premises in your thinking can become lenses that distort the way we see the world and interpret it to ourselves. It's not that complicated once I explain it, so let me begin. There are two particular types of assumptions in thinking that really hang people up. One, unrealistic expectations. And the second is misplaced dependencies. Now, both of these are premises, ways of approaching life. Now, unrealistic expectations, in a way, is self-explanatory. That's any time any of us begin to view life in ways that are not realistic. Like what? Well, let me throw out some examples. Everyone will always like me. Life will always be good. Things will go my way. Life shouldn't have problems to it. I can expect health, happiness, and wealth as I go through life. I will always be appreciated for the good that I do. And then, for those who serve, the people I serve, patients, clients, they will always benefit and get better because of what I do. Now, just in saying those expectations, your reaction is probably, that's ridiculous. And of course, you're exactly right, it is ridiculous. Now let's take the first one, everybody will always like me. Well, it's normal to want to be liked. I want to be liked, I'm sure you want to be liked. But once you really bring it out on the table, is it realistic that everybody is going to like me? Well, incredible as it may seem, no. Why? Well, do I like everybody? And the answer is no. There's some folks I just don't care for. It's something about them. Maybe there's a good reason. Maybe I can't explain it. Well, guess what? I'm that person to somebody else. Now, back to the original thing we did in our last session, what can I control? Well, I can control whether I seek to be likable. You know, some people are unlikable because of the way they behave. Well, I seek to be likable. I seek to treat people well and to serve and to do something good for them. But how they respond, that's out of my control, isn't it? And the fact is, in this life, everybody's not going to like me. Guess what? I'm going to have trouble. I'm going to have problems. That's normal in this world. Things are not always going to go my way. I'm not always going to be appreciated for the good that I do, no matter how good it is. See, a realistic view of life, once you bring it out and look at it, will have to lead you there. But you see, if that remains a hidden assumption, it's something that's not conscious, then I'm set up for trouble. Because what's going to happen in this world? Well, let's just sum it up and call it negative reality. Negative reality. What happens when an unrealistic expectation runs into reality? Well, the result is disappointment. And disappointment is what I call the ledge. Now, and I'll explain why in a minute. You see, unrealistic expectation is, let's take one from serving. Everybody I coach, for example, is going to learn and benefit from and get better because of what I do. Well, that's not realistic. Some folks aren't going to. They don't care or they don't want to. They don't want to change. That's the negative reality. And what happens? Well, you land with a thud right here. Disappointment. Now, It's normal to be disappointed sometimes. We all experience disappointments. But the warning sign is somebody who has kind of a continuous series of disappointments. When someone like that encounters me and I learn about this, my first thought is they must be having some unrealistic expectations, because otherwise you wouldn't live in continuous disappointment. So that, if this is a regular occurrence, that's where you want to look to see what's going on. What's the root of it? Now, misplaced dependencies. That sounds a little far out, but it's not hard to explain. To be human means we have certain needs and certain wants. It doesn't matter what background, where you're from, we all have them. Sooner or later, human beings ask the same basic three questions. One, about identity. We say, who am I? We want to know where meaning and purpose can be found. We want to ask, why am I here? And then we want to find love and acceptance. We ask the question, where can I belong? Where can I be a part of a group and be accepted and loved? Or where can I find the person who will make me complete? So who am I? Why am I here? Where can I belong? Or how can I be made complete? Are normal human questions that we all ask. So what's wrong? What's wrong is if we depend on unworthy objects to find the answers to those questions. For example, identity. How do people decide who they are? Well, they define their identity through their abilities, achievements, through appearance on occasion, their background, their connections. Now, for example, I'm an executive coach. I like coaching. But if I lost this ability to do this tomorrow, I'm still me, because I know who I am. My identity is based on things that are solid, not on an occupation. But you see this in many places. If somebody identifies themselves as what they do, then they live in fear, because anything in this world can be changed or taken away from you. Now, sooner or later, everything will. You know, I often tell the story of a childhood friend of mine who became a professional basketball player. All-American in college, then played on an NBA championship team. We were the same age. And I'll never forget when I heard on the radio that he had just retired from professional basketball. He was now too old to play, at the ripe old age of 32. Which I look back now and I thought, that sure doesn't sound old to me. But it's old for a professional athlete. You see, if his identity was athlete, who has he been for the last 32 years? Okay, that's what can happen. We see this in many parents. A woman identifies herself as, my identity is mother. Well, then one day the kids grow up and leave. Who are you now? And we call that the empty nest syndrome. So you see, to root your identity in things in this world that can be changed is a bad idea. To find meaning and purpose in things that are unworthy of that dependency. Again, they can be threatened and changed. To be looking for perfect love and acceptance from a human being isn't going to happen. The people who love us the most are going to disappoint us and let us down on occasion, and possibly a worse rejection than that. And so this is something everybody has to find for themselves. You know, this is part of our God-given right, as the Declaration of Independence says, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, to find our own answer to these questions. But I believe we need to bring them out and examine them to make sure that we're on solid ground. Because what happens here is when a dependency is threatened, you end up with stark, raving fear. It's the only thing that can happen. If your identity is caregiver, what if you lose your job? Who are you now? Or what if they're not responding the way you think they should? Who are you now? So your identity needs to be someplace better than that. But if you find people dealing with disappointment and fear, my first thought is, I wonder what's going on in their thinking. And it's going to be assumptions that they're not conscious of. Like a lens you look through, it colors what you see, but you don't see the lens. Now, it's from here. The reason I call that the ledge is because this is how somebody can really get into trouble. Because if you make the step at this point, you can start heading down the downward spiral. And typically that step is anger. Anger is when we step off the ledge. You know, you don't have to step, but if you step, you're going to go down. That's the way it works. And anger builds a cycle. Anger flames out eventually because we run out of energy, just plain run out of gas. And the ashes of a flamed out anger are self-pity. And then we get angry again, and then flames out, more self-pity. And the spiral continues until people actually hit depression. Now, the depression I'm talking about is not clinical depression. You know, that's a medical problem about brain chemistry, and a person like that needs medical intervention. I'm talking about the kind of depression any one of us who are normally functioning can work ourselves into by choices. Okay, so what should you do? Well, watch out for anger, fear, and disappointment. If these things tend to recur often in your life, or if you see that you seem to continuously live in them, I can tell you where the problem can be solved. And I'll tell you where the problem began. In your thinking up here. See, negative reality is part of life. That's not going to change. Those bad things are going to happen. Things are not going to go our way all the time. How we respond to those things and how we think about those things becomes critical. So I really believe for somebody in a serving profession, you need to think through these things carefully. And if you start seeing these danger signs, come back here and ask, what are my assumptions? What are my premises? Because that's where you'll find the answer. So I've shared 3 tools today. Support Mountain, which is your self-maintenance system to know how to maintain yourself and to be making plans to do so regularly. Talked about managing the stress by concentrating on what we can control, not on things we cannot control, not living in the anxiety zone. And then this 3rd tool is looking at our thinking and stepping back and asking, what are my assumptions? What are my expectations about people in life? And then my expectations in terms of what am I depending upon for who I am, why I'm here, what's the real basis of my life, making sure it's in solid things and not in changeable things.